There is a moment every man experiences but almost no one recognizes. A moment so quiet it feels insignificant, yet powerful enough to flip the entire dynamic between a man and a woman. It happens when you stop trying, when your attention fades, not out of strategy, but out of genuine exhaustion or clarity, when you no longer place her at the center of your thoughts, when your mind detaches, your energy pulls back, and your presence stops orbiting around her. Most men think this is the end. What they never understand is that this is exactly where everything begins. Pay attention to this shift, because women feel it before you do. They sense the loss of your emotional gravity, the same way someone notices the sudden absence of warmth in a room. At first, they act the same. They speak with the same tone. They move with the same confidence. But slowly, quietly, something breaks inside them. The certainty they once had begins to fracture. The comfort of being desired starts to slip. And the man they took for granted becomes a mystery again. This is the point where desire awakens. Not when you chase, not when you explain, not when you prove your worth. It awakens when you step back into yourself. When your silence replaces your eagerness. When your absence forces her to confront a question she cannot ignore. Why does a man who once wanted me no longer need me? This question is the spark. It strikes at the core of her instincts, her ego, and her subconscious desires. Women are not drawn to availability. They are drawn to the unknown, to the man whose mind they cannot fully enter, to the man who carries himself with the quiet authority of someone who does not rely on approval to feel whole. In that moment, you stop being predictable. You stop being safe, and you become something she cannot categorize or control. This reversal is not magic. It is psychology. It is the instant when your value rises because it is no longer offered freely. It is the moment when your emotional distance activates the ancient part of the female mind built to chase what cannot be easily claimed. And it is the moment when a man must choose who he will become. The version of himself that once begged for attention, or the version that learned the power of walking away. Every man reaches this crossroads. Only a few recognize it, and even fewer know what to do when the dynamic finally breaks. What you are about to understand is the truth hidden beneath centuries of human behavior. The truth Machiavelli would point to without hesitation. Desire flows toward strength, not need. The unseen script women follow. Most men move through relationships as if attraction were chaos, as if women simply felt something unpredictable and acted on impulse. That illusion destroys their confidence. Attraction is not chaos. It is a pattern, a silent script written deep in the unconscious mind, guiding women toward men who create specific emotional states. Not the men who try hardest, nor the ones who speak the sweetest, but the ones who activate psychological codes she doesn't even know she follows. The first code is scarcity. Not the artificial type men try to imitate, but the natural scarcity of a man who has a life larger than his desire for her. A man who moves with purpose, who protects his time, who does not collapse into availability at every notification. Scarcity signals value because it shows he is not shaped by other people's attention. It reveals a man whose identity is rooted in something deeper than external approval. The second code is value autonomy. Women are irresistibly drawn to men who do not rely on them for emotional stability. When a man can stand alone, she feels both challenged and intrigued. His self-sufficiency forces her to rise to him rather than pull him down. She senses a man who chooses her, not a man who needs her. And that difference changes everything. The third code is unpredictability. Not inconsistency, but the unpredictable presence of a man who is not emotionally reactive. A man who does not rush to fill silence, who does not explain himself to relieve tension, who does not reveal everything he feels just to maintain closeness. His emotional discipline creates an atmosphere of mystery. A woman is drawn to that tension because it awakens desire, imagination, and pursuit. Women do not desire men. They desire the emotional world those men create inside them. The man who triggers scarcity, autonomy, and unpredictability becomes a psychological storm she cannot ignore. He pulls her into a state where she feels both challenged and alive. And that is the beginning of pursuit. Power flows to the less interested. Every interaction between a man and a woman contains a silent negotiation of power. Not the loud, aggressive type, but the subtle psychological leverage that shapes who leads, who follows, and who desires more. Most men sabotage themselves because they enter this negotiation already surrendered. They approach women as if they are the ones seeking approval, validation, or permission to be chosen. This guarantees defeat before the first word is spoken. The core of Machiavellian strategy is simple. Power naturally moves toward the person who needs less. In relationships, this principle becomes lethal. When a man's emotional state depends on a woman's response, he gives her unconscious authority over him. She feels the imbalance instantly. His desire becomes excessive. His attention becomes predictable, and his presence loses weight. A woman cannot desire a man who has already placed himself beneath her. But when a man remains centered, when he chooses without needing, when he shows interest without dependence, the dynamic reverses. His value increases because he is not emotionally captive. He becomes the one standing on solid ground while she adjusts herself to match his pace. His attention becomes meaningful because it is not given cheaply. Desire thrives in uncertainty. When a woman cannot fully measure a man's internal world, her mind stays engaged. She becomes invested not because he withholds, but because he does not chase. His restraint tells her that he is governed by purpose, not impulse. His silence reveals strength, not weakness. His calm detachment communicates a hierarchy she instinctively respects, and this is where control shifts. A man does not dominate through force or intensity. He leads through emotional sovereignty. When he is willing to walk away, even from what he wants, he becomes the one with leverage. A woman responds to that presence because it taps into a timeless dynamic. The man who needs the least is the man she is most drawn to. Why indifference activates her instinct. Indifference is not a tactic. It is a psychological trigger rooted in the deepest layers of human behavior. When a man pulls back, not as a performance, but as a natural consequence of self-respect, something fundamental shifts inside a woman's mind. Her instincts activate, not because he is playing a game, but because his emotional distance disrupts the predictable reward cycle she unconsciously relied on. The brain is wired to chase inconsistent rewards. What is always available becomes invisible. What appears, disappears, and reappears becomes magnetic. This is the same mechanism that fuels addiction, ambition, and desire. When a man stops offering constant validation, the dopamine loop she was accustomed to begins to destabilize. That instability creates pursuit. Her mind starts to anticipate his next move, her emotions amplify, and her imagination fills the gaps he no longer rushes to explain. But the deeper layer is evolutionary. Emotional distance signals a man who is not dependent, not controlled by instinct, and not overwhelmed by attachment. That sends a powerful message. He has options. He has standards. He has purpose. These qualities indicate long-term value and genetic fitness. A woman reads this unconsciously, not through logic, but through instinctual attraction to emotional sovereignty. There is also the tension factor. Indifference creates a controlled uncertainty that forces her into vulnerability. When she cannot fully decode him, her mind stays engaged. She starts analyzing his silence, interpreting his actions, and seeking his presence to restore balance. This mental investment is the seed of desire. Her pursuit is not about winning him, but about regaining internal equilibrium. A man's greatest mistake is believing that effort creates attraction. In truth, effort destroys mystery. What awakens desire is the emotional discipline of a man who is not governed by impulse. Indifference is powerful because it communicates that he chooses carefully, that he protects his energy, and that he will not bend simply to be liked. That message resonates deeper than any compliment ever will. Archetypes of male presence that trigger pursuit. A woman's attraction does not respond to words, promises, or explanations. It responds to presence. And presence is not charisma, extroversion, or theatrics. Presence is the psychological atmosphere a man carries, the emotional signature he projects without effort. When a woman encounters a man with a certain type of presence, something ancient inside her awakens. These are not surface traits. They are archetypes, patterns embedded in the collective unconscious that signal strength, mystery, and sovereignty. The first is the self-sufficient wolf. He does not isolate himself out of fear or arrogance. He stands alone because his life is full, his purpose is larger than any relationship, and his validation comes from internal standards. A woman feels this instantly. She senses a man who will not collapse into dependence. His independence challenges her. His emotional autonomy draws her closer. The second is the silent sovereign. He does not lead through noise or dominance. His authority comes from discipline, self-control, and the calm certainty of a man who does not rush to prove anything. His silence is not emptiness, it is command. Women feel safe around him, yet intrigued, because he reveals little but observes everything. His presence makes her instinctively slow down, soften, and pay attention. The third is the indifferent warrior, not cold, not detached, but unshaken. He is the man who does not react to provocation, who remains composed under pressure, who carries the emotional armor forged from hardship and self-mastery. His stability invites desire because it shows he cannot be manipulated. He becomes the immovable object her mind cannot fully predict. The fourth is the man with an untouchable life. He lives with depth, mission, and direction. His identity is not tied to approval, romance, or external reassurance. A woman is drawn to him because he is already complete. She becomes the addition, not the center. Women pursue men who bring them into a world, not men who abandon their world to pursue them. These archetypes are not roles a man pretends to play. They emerge naturally when he aligns with purpose, self-respect, and emotional discipline. When a man embodies even one of these presences, women do not simply notice him, they begin to pursue him. Women test for weakness, not strength. Most men believe women search for strength. The truth is more uncomfortable. They search for weakness. Not because they want to break a man, but because the female subconscious tests relentlessly to determine whether his strength is real or just a performance. Every pullback, every provocation, every sudden coldness, these are not random behaviors. They are measurements. They are instinctive attempts to see if a man's confidence collapses under pressure or if his composure holds. A woman does not test to punish. She tests to reveal. When she pushes a boundary, she wants to know whether she is dealing with a man who bends at the slightest discomfort or a man who stands firm because he has an internal center. When she withdraws affection, she watches your reaction. Do you panic? Do you chase? Do you negotiate your value? Or do you remain calm, grounded, and focused on your life? A man's reaction tells her everything she needs to know. This is emotional fitness testing. She is evaluating the weight of your presence, the consistency of your identity, the integrity of your boundaries. Weakness is revealed in instant reassurance seeking, over-explaining, or trying to win back approval. Strength is revealed in emotional neutrality, in the refusal to abandon purpose, in the ability to stay composed even when the dynamic becomes uncertain. Value verification works the same way. Women instinctively seek to confirm whether your perceived value matches your internal reality. If you crumble the moment she pulls away, she understands that your confidence was fragile. If you remain centered, she recognizes a man whose value is not determined by her behavior. Masculine resistance is not about confrontation. It is about non-reactivity. The man who cannot be thrown off balance becomes the man she respects. And respect is the root of desire. Women pursue men who withstand the test, not men who fear it. What she truly wants is not control. It is certainty that you are stronger than her emotions and stronger than your own. Why most men fail the game. Most men lose the moment they feel attraction, not because they are unworthy, but because they abandon themselves. They trade strength for approval, presence for pursuit, identity for the illusion of connection. Their collapse is not dramatic. It is subtle, quiet, almost invisible, yet fatal. It begins the moment a man believes he must earn a woman's interest. From that point on, every action he takes communicates need, not value. Over-pursuing is the first wound. When a man pushes too hard, he reveals that his emotional world depends on her response. Women sense this instantly. What was once mysterious becomes predictable. What was once intriguing becomes accessible. Effort without restraint suffocates desire because it proves he seeks validation rather than connection. Over-explaining is another fracture. When a man reveals every thought, every insecurity, every motive, he strips himself of psychological depth. He thinks transparency creates closeness, but it creates exposure. Desire does not live in certainty, it lives in the unknown. Emotional transparency at the wrong time destroys polarity. A man who rushes to confess, justify, apologize, and clarify becomes a man who places his emotional state in her hands. Women cannot desire what they must protect from the consequences of its own feelings. Seeking validation is the root collapse. When a man adjusts his behavior to be liked, accepted, or chosen, he abandons the very qualities that make him attractive. He becomes a reflection of her expectations instead of an embodiment of his own standards. And a woman cannot admire a man who loses himself to earn her approval. Breaking frame is the final mistake. The moment he reacts emotionally to her tests, he confirms weakness. The moment he chases after she withdraws, he confirms dependence. The moment he prioritizes her attention above his purpose, he confirms that his value is negotiable, and negotiable value is never respected. Men fail not because women are complex, but because they forget who they are the moment they want someone. Attraction does not collapse because of her behavior. It collapses because of his. She only wants the man who doesn't need her. A harsh truth most men resist is that women do not desire the man who places them at the center of his world. They desire the man who moves with purpose strong enough to stand without them. This is not cruelty, it is psychology. A woman cannot feel attraction toward a man who treats her as a lifeline. She only desires the man who stands tall on his own, who loves without attachment, and who gives without sacrificing his identity. A man who does not need her is not heartless. He is sovereign. He chooses connection, but never at the cost of his mission. His attention is valuable because it is not scattered. His presence is powerful because it is not dependent. His interest is meaningful because it is not rooted in fear of loss. This is the foundation of masculine allure, the ability to want someone without collapsing into wanting too much. Women are drawn to men with purpose because purpose is stability. A man with direction emanates a psychological gravity that commands respect. His life has weight, momentum, and structure. When a woman steps into that world, she feels both challenged and elevated. She senses a man who will not be swayed by her emotions, her moods, or her tests, and that stability is irresistible. Boundaries are another layer of this truth. A man who protects his time, energy, and values signals that he is not willing to compromise his identity for affection. Women interpret boundaries as strength, not distance. A man who can say no becomes more desirable than a man who constantly tries to please. Emotional armor is not numbness, it is discipline. It is the ability to remain calm when others react, to stay grounded when others panic, to respond with clarity instead of impulse. A man who masters this becomes the stillness in her storm. He is not carried away by her emotional tides, and that creates trust, admiration, and attraction. The man who doesn't need her is not indifferent to love. He simply refuses to sacrifice the core of who he is. And women pursue that man not because he withholds affection, but because he holds himself. The skill. Every man must master. Indifference is one of the most misunderstood forces in male psychology. Weak men imitate it as a tactic. Strong men embody it as a byproduct of self-respect. Strategic indifference is not about pretending not to care. It is about refusing to let your emotional world be controlled by someone else's behavior. It is the discipline of staying centered, composed, and grounded, regardless of how much you desire a woman or how intensely she tries to pull you out of your frame. True indifference begins with non-reactivity. When a woman withdraws, tests, provokes, or creates tension, the average man becomes emotional. He chases, argues, explains, or breaks down. The sovereign man does none of that. He observes. He lets the moment breathe. He allows silence to do the work. His lack of reaction is not coldness, it is strength. It communicates that his identity does not depend on the fluctuation of her attention. Value sovereignty is another pillar. When a man knows he brings something rare and grounded into a relationship, stability, direction, resilience, he no longer negotiates his worth. He no longer tries to convince someone to appreciate him. He no longer bends to be accepted. His value stands independently of approval. This self-sustaining identity makes a woman recalibrate her behavior around him, not the other way around. Inner abundance fuels this state. Men who live with purpose, brotherhood, fitness, ambition, and personal growth do not cling to relationships. Their lives are already full. A woman becomes a complement, not a lifeline. Desire flows naturally toward men who do not seek emotional rescue through romance. Silence becomes a weapon in the hands of a disciplined man. Not passive aggression, not manipulation. Silence as clarity. Silence as boundaries. Silence as a reminder that he will not participate in chaos or emotional games. Women are drawn to this presence because it signals psychological maturity. It shows he can handle life without needing constant reassurance or emotional drama. Strategic indifference is not about withholding love. It is about never withholding yourself from your own mission. And the man who masters this becomes impossible to manipulate and impossible to ignore. The signs of reversed desire. When the dynamic finally shifts, most men don't notice it. They are so used to being the ones who pursue, the ones who adapt, the ones who initiate, that they fail to recognize the unmistakable signs of reversed desire. A woman rarely announces her pursuit openly. Instead, her behavior changes in ways that reveal something deeper. She is no longer in control of the emotional rhythm. You are. The first sign is subtle engagement. She begins responding faster, with more curiosity, and with a noticeable shift in tone. Her messages carry warmth she once withheld. Her attention becomes intentional instead of casual. She invests because your restraint has given your presence new value. The second sign appears in her testing. But this time, the tests are not designed to expose your weakness. They are attempts to reaffirm your strength. She becomes more reactive to your silence. She notices when you pull back. She tries to capture your focus through humor, vulnerability, or small provocations. She is no longer testing to measure your worth. She is testing to confirm she has not lost her place. Then comes the behavioral pursuit. She mirrors your schedule, your availability, and your pace. She initiates conversations, suggests plans, and offers more of herself emotionally. A woman only does this when she feels she has something to gain and something to lose. This vulnerability is not weakness, it is desire. A deeper sign emerges through inconsistency in her own walls. The defenses she once used vanish. She becomes more expressive, more open, more attentive. She begins revealing thoughts she hid before, fears she masked, and emotions she previously denied. This shift is not accidental. It is a woman dropping her guard because she senses you are not chasing her anymore. The final sign is the one most men misinterpret. Her fear of losing you. It shows up in questions about your plans, your life, your priorities. It shows up in concern when you go silent. It shows up in the tension she feels when she realizes your world does not revolve around her. This is the turning point. When a woman fears losing a man, she begins to pursue him, not to possess him, but to win his presence again. These signs are not random behaviors. They are the psychological markers of a dynamic that has shifted into your favor. The man who recognizes them knows he has become the one with gravity. Becoming a man, women fear to lose. Becoming a man women fear to lose has nothing to do with arrogance, manipulation, or emotional games. It begins when a man finally understands that attraction is not built by chasing, convincing, or proving. It is built by embodying a life so grounded, disciplined, and purpose-driven that your presence becomes a force in itself. Women fear losing a man whose identity is not negotiable, whose standards do not bend, and whose direction remains unchanged, regardless of emotional turbulence. This ascension starts with self-mastery. A man who governs his impulses, who controls his reactions, who channels his emotions instead of spilling them everywhere, becomes rare. Emotional discipline is power. It communicates stability in a world where most men crumble under pressure. A woman cannot ignore a man who carries himself with this level of internal order. Next comes purpose. Not a hobby, not a distraction, but a mission, something that shapes your days, your mindset, and your ambition. A man with a mission becomes magnetic because he moves with clarity. His life has structure, momentum, and meaning. He is not waiting for someone to complete him. He is already in motion, and she must rise to meet him. Then comes sovereignty. A sovereign man does not fear loss because he does not build his identity on external affection. He values connection, but he never clings to it. He is willing to walk away from anything that threatens his integrity or undermines his standards. This willingness creates an aura of power that women feel instantly. She knows he is not trapped by desire. He is guided by principle. Boundaries become his armor. He protects his time, his energy, and his emotional space. He does not allow disrespect, inconsistency, or manipulation to take root. He enforces standards calmly, without anger. A man who enforces boundaries without breaking composure becomes one of the rarest masculine archetypes. The final transformation is presence, a presence that is quiet but heavy, calm but dominant. A presence built on experience, pain, growth, and self-respect. It is the presence of a man who has suffered, rebuilt himself, and risen above the chaos of his past. Women fear losing this man not because he threatens to leave, but because they can feel the strength of someone who doesn't need them to stay. This is masculine ascension, the evolution from seeking to choosing, from reacting to leading, from insecurity to sovereignty. When a man becomes this version of himself, attraction is no longer something he chases. It is something he commands.